Okay, here we go.
Good.
Oh, yeah, now it's okay. Yeah.
Went to a party on Hanukkah. I brought some latkes and my menorah. We started playing Dreidel, we took a turn. We sat around, watched those candles burn. Let's rock. Everybody, let's rock. And the party was so geschmack as we danced to the Hanukkah rock. I have a little dreidel, I made it out of clay. And when it's dry and ready, oh dreidel I shall play. So. Let's gather around the table, we'll give you a treat. A civivon to play with and latkes to eat. A civivon, so. Chag Simcha hu la'am, nes gadol hayasham. We light the candles for a trade night. We watch them burn and shine so bright. We dance and sing around the lights of Hanukkah. I'm all lit up. Yeah. Yeah. I'm all lit up. Ma'os to Yeshua Tilchana Elishabea Tikon Be'tefilati V'sham Toda Nezabea V'etachit Matbea V'itzar Hamnabea Azeg Mor B'shir Mizmor Chanukah Tamizbeah. You ain't nothing but a lie, frying all the time. You ain't nothing but a lie, frying all the time. Yeah. Well, you give me acid reflux and you ain't no friend of mine. You ain't nothing but a dreidel, spin all the time. You ain't nothing but a dreidel, spin all the time. Well, you better give me or you ain't no friend of mine.
Very good.
Very good.
We are a creative lot, aren't we? You know, it's they manage to come up with something every year.
How long does that go? How long does it go for?
That one's 3.5 minutes.
Okay, it's very good. Yeah.
It is. It's just 6 guys who went into a studio and did that video.
Okay.
It's not one of those groups, is it? Like
No.
Mecca Beats or
No,
one
it's
of.
just informal.
Okay.
That's excellent. Very good.
Okay. Let me just get.
Now I'm going to do our security procedure now. So Alan and Michael will need to unmute yourselves. Michael's back with us.
Yeah.
Alan's back.
My internet seems a little patchy tonight. Is everybody else noticing that?
You froze for a little while, but it's okay now.
Yeah, no, yes, it just sort of gets a bit patchy or crackly for a couple of seconds and then restores. Wasn't the NBN supposed to fix all of that?
Government services, mate. They're wonderful. So how are we going? We've got about a minute and a half.
Yeah.
The latecomers missed one of our Hanukkah videos, so but the early comers saw it.
You've put it up on our.
It's on our
website.
Facebook page as well.
Yeah, it's good.
And our YouTube channel. Oh, it's not ours, so
No,
it doesn't go on our YouTube
It's not,
channel.
it's not on YouTube. We've still got people coming in.
Yes.
I think we're all already on the cusp of holiday time.
Yeah.
Someone put a very nice message on. Thank you for a wonderful year. Kol hakavod.
Back in a moment.
Appreciate your efforts in standing up for Yisrael. Enjoy a break. Looking forward to seeing you next year. Wasn't that nice?
Oh, that's what was that from the JCCV or AJ?
Yeah, sure.
No, well, wasn't Colin Rubenstein or Mark Liebler? No.
Okay, Alan.
Okay, I think we.
8:01. Yeah, you can kick off. Give a 10-second break for editing and go for it.
Yep. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Happy Hanukkah, and thanks for joining us on our final AJA Zoom event for 2022. And we always seem to have some new names every week, so welcome to any new people watching for the first time. We also welcome those watching on Facebook and to others who listen to the audio replay, which is broadcast every Thursday at midday and Sundays at 4 p.m. on J-Air Community Radio. That's at FM 88 in Melbourne or at j-air.com.au. My name is Alan Friedman. I'm Vice President of the Australian Jewish Association. As you will have seen on the screen, there is David Adler, President of the AJA. And our guests tonight, well, it's us. It's David, it's Robert Gregory, the Director of Public Affairs, it's Michael Bird and myself from the AJA. What we're going to do is a recap of 2022, some of the highlights and lowlights, and then we're going to throw it open to the audience and we'll let you have a say. The format will be that we're firstly going to hear from the AJA executive, just for a few minutes. Then we'll go to a discussion and we'll take questions from the audience to the panel. As usual, I always remind people that if you want to ask a question, we like you to raise your hand electronically, and the way to do that is in the reaction icon down the bottom of the screen. You can put some written questions or comments on the chat function, and Robert Gregory, our Director of Public Affairs, will read some of them out during question time. It's probably true of every year, but certainly a lot has happened in the Jewish world in 2022, both here in Australia and around the world. So tonight will be more of a casual recap of some of the major issues we have covered. And I said before that just like Andrew Bolt, I'm enjoying a l'chaim. I've got a 15-year-old Glenlivet. So if anybody wants to join me, then please do. What we're going to be doing is having the AJA executive of David, Robert, Michael and myself remind us all of some of the more important issues that we touched upon this year and some of the outcomes that we achieved or wish we had achieved. And whilst the speakers will cover a range of topics they were primarily involved with, of course, the AJA functions as a team and others will have had some or a lot of input as well. But just to set the scene, take a look at this latest tribute video that highlights what some of the more important and more prominent people think about the AJA. This just goes for about 5 or 6 minutes.
Now, joining me live is Dr. David Adler.
Yes, Dr. David Adler, head of the Australian Jewish Association.
Association President David Adler.
About the left's total intolerance towards Israel.
As a direct consequence of the lobbying by David Adler, by outsiders, by Pauline Hanson and others, we had a major victory in the Australian Parliament, and the then Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop, agreed to slash Australian funding to UNRWA by $10 million. As David Adler writes on the Australian Jewish Association Facebook page, this is reprehensible. Australia is increasing the funding of hatred and terror incitement.
And I am delighted to be joined by the Honourable Sarah Game, MLC from South Australia. And Sarah was the person who moved in the South Australia Parliament for the adoption of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance.
In closing, I would like to thank Dr. David Adler, President of the Australian Jewish Association, for drawing my attention to this important motion. It has been a great privilege to introduce the motion to the Legislative Council.
Whatever your views on the various issues, there is nothing in Australia remotely like the Holocaust.
Pro-Israeli groups online like Australian Jewish Association are calling these posters and protests anti-Semitic.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adler. Indeed, I met you actually on my third day in Australia.
Thank you so much. Well, distinguished guests, of the Australian Jewish Association, my sincere thanks.
So much. I'm so pleased to be talking to the Australian Jewish community again.
My pleasure, and very good to be here.
It's a pleasure to meet all of you, or at least to be able to see all of you.
Thank you so much, Alan and David, for having me. It's a pleasure to speak to the Australian Jewish Association and all the people.
Parliament, as well as to many communities, and it's always a pleasure to be with Australia.
Thanks for the invitation from David, and I look forward to the discussion.
Aboriginal community, Indigenous community here in Australia have had a very long relationship with the Jewish community in UK.
This is Gideon Rosner. He's the Director of Policy of the Institute of Public Affairs.
That Israel is the only country on earth that Australia has this particular approach to the capital. Every other country, there's no question, it can nominate its capital.
As I said, I am completely bamboozled by this decision, and I do not see why there was any need for this government to pander to radical Islamism and left-wing activism.
I want you to know that the Jewish people understand what it's like to be persecuted by a large totalitarian regime. The world has a moral imperative. The major lesson was supposed to be never again. And that means that when a people is persecuted for their ethno-national or religious identities, we must speak out. We must do what we can to stop it.
Start with what should be a simple statement, but is actually now controversial. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Jewish roof bodies turned their attention to solving issues of gender at yet another full-day social justice.
Another set of freedoms that we'll need.
As you can see sitting next to me, I have someone who needs no introduction at all. Senator Pauline Hanson.
It's been a while since I've been contacted before a meeting and advised not to take part in it. But I was before this one by some Australian left-wingers that I know.
Rabbi Shmuley's putting on the badge for the Australian Jewish Association. Good on you.
I love the AJA. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for the second time.
I've long been impressed, terribly impressed with the work that the association does and in terms of addressing the most serious and pressing issues facing the Jewish world and Israel.
A huge admirer of the AJ, and I'll follow your work closely.
For anybody that might question or wonder what the Australian Jewish Association does, can I tell you that the materials that they provide me is exceptionally helpful, and as a result I'm able to prosecute these matters so much more effectively at Senate estimates.
I want to say briefly what a big fan I am of the AJA.
I have a great relationship with all the Jewish community representative bodies, but I think the AGA is a really important development in Jewish community advocacy, and I welcome the distinctive voice that you provide in the public debate. David and I actually first got to know each other through an inquiry of the Joint Committee on Human Rights into Section 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act. And David gave a brilliant and powerful presentation before the committee about how support for free speech is intrinsic to Jewish philosophy and religious teachings. And it was a distinctive perspective because most other Jewish community organisations were supporters of 18C and opposed to reform of it. And so I really welcome the voice that you provide, particularly for the centre-right community within the Jewish community. It's a really important one.
I want to congratulate your organisation on its very principled submission on behalf of the Uyghurs in Western China. You're very principled and ethical to do that. It's a terrible situation, and kol hakavod. Again, I conclude by, when I hear other organisations and individuals bagging the AJA, you should hold out to your great credit your stand on behalf of the people who are being sent to concentration camps or having their women sterilised forcibly by a state. So that's the big issue of the day, the big moral issue, the big ethical issue of the day, and it's clear where you and I stand, and we're together on this. Thank you.
Okay, that pretty good, wasn't it? Okay, what we're going to do, if anybody's just joined us, we're going to hear a little bit from the AJA executive first up for the next 20 minutes or so, and we'll just touch on some of the issues that we covered in 2022, and then we're going to throw it open to the audience. And I'll remind you again, but if you do want to say something or ask a question, we do ask you to raise your hand electronically, and you do that by clicking on the reactions icon at the bottom of the screen. Okay, we're going to start with David Adler, President of the AJA. So I'm going to hand over to David, and he can just tell us about some of the things that were happening in AJA from his perspective over 2022.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. And yeah, that video almost makes us look pretty good. But I think it's remarkable how much has been done with in such a short time. There's just a few issues I'm going to touch upon because I don't want to take much time. Within the last few months, we have launched a new division in AJA. It's the culmination of a 2.5-year project where we have now a charitable entity which we call AJA Tzedakah. Not only is it charitable, but it's fully compliant for tax-deductible donations. Its primary objective is to combat anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, that is a growing challenge for our community, and I think Alan's going to mention one of the things we've already engaged in and helped using the AJA Tzedakah vehicle. We also have a rule in it, an approved rule, that we can use the charitable arm to support Jewish culture. That's really important. It means that we can help with the connection of young people with Judaism, with pride in being Jewish. The video alluded also to the IHRA in South Australia. No doubt at all that AJA was fully responsible for that state looking at the IHRA. It's a particularly challenging environment in South Australia. There have been some ugly incidents that we're dealing with. We have maintained contact with various senior diplomats, including the ambassadors that you saw on the video, the ones from Ukraine and UAE. And indeed, when we had a small group in Canberra a couple of months ago, the UAE ambassador invited us for lunch at his official residence in Canberra. These sort of relationships would have been unthinkable just a few years ago, but we think the Abraham Accords are very good, and it's something we will continue. And finally, the final issue I want to mention, of course, is the election of the new Labor government in Australia. And I need to call this out. The Jewish community was conned. We had a number of members of Parliament, including a Jewish member of Parliament who said, oh, there's not going to really be any difference in policy between Labor and the coalition on Jewish community matters in Israel. And indeed, we have seen already 5 quite hostile to Israel decisions made. The first was when the UN established the Permanent Commission of Inquiry into just one country in the world, Israel, and Australia did not join with the 22 democratic countries in condemning this, made a separate statement. The fact that Australia didn't join with the important allies was already a signal. One of the reforms that we pushed for under the previous government to reduce funding to UNRWA has been reversed by the Labor government, despite all the evidence that UNRWA incites violence and is a highly anti-Semitic organisation. Australia is now giving an extra $10 million to UNRWA. The Jerusalem decision, I'm sure everyone knows about, a dreadful decision. The decision under the Morrison government wasn't great. This one is worse and is frankly an insult to not just the Jewish community, but to Israel as well. And it's damaged relationships to some extent in our view, and there'll have to be work to repair it. And finally, just a matter of weeks ago, towards the end of each year, it's customary in the UN General Assembly to introduce various anti-Israel resolutions. The Australian voting pattern has altered, whereas it might have voted against one of these resolutions, it abstained. This has been called out by UN Watch. So taken as a package, we do think that the Labor government is going to be very challenging. We're going to have to work closely with any allies, both here and in Israel, to try to manage it. And that's the final of the big issues that I want to mention, Alan. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. We're going to go now to Robert Gregory, our Director of Public Affairs. So, Robert, I will ask you to unmute yourself and say something. And Robert's got a couple of things that he wants to talk about. So, where's Robert? Is Robert...
I'm here, yeah. Can you hear me?
There he is. Yep, now we can. Thanks, Robert. So, Robert, just tell us, you made a presentation to the Senate, to a Senate committee. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about the background to that and what happened?
Yeah, so a couple of things just want to run through quickly. So we did a submission on the situation in Iran. We were able to touch on some issues that, I mean, the Jewish community obviously has a lot of experience with Iranian human rights abuses, both to the Iranian Jewish community and also to Jewish sites worldwide, whether it's in Argentina or Bulgaria. So we made this submission. We were the first Jewish organization in Australia to do so. Then we were invited to testify before the Senate, which I did, and it was very well received. We've been contacted by leaders of other community organizations, both within the Jewish and outside the Jewish community, as well as actually even Iranian women have reached out to AJA through social media and contacted us. So we made a few recommendations, which were the first time I was seeing those recommendations raised. And if anyone wants to see the submissions, they're available on our social media. Unfortunately, there was a little incident afterwards with, while it was very well received in the Jewish community and the general media, within the Jewish media specifically, it was ignored, unfortunately, but that's sort of the environment we're in. We have also made another submission to a different inquiry, which just closed at the end of last week, dealing with the situation of women and children in conflict zones, and we've focused on particularly the situation in the Palestinian territories and the incitement of children there, including now with Australian taxpayer aid going towards that with UNRWA. So I wonder how the government will receive that, but we have made that submission recently.
Okay, Robert, tell us, when you make these submissions, how much time do you get, and do you have to prepare a presentation, or do they just ask you questions?
Well, it really depends on the submission. So there were a lot of interested groups in this. There was Kurdish, Baha'i, Iranian groups, a lot of different people with an interest in it. So they do like to, you can make an opening statement, or they like you to keep it quite short, and then the senators ask follow-up questions. So one of their follow-up questions was, what can the government do, to help people feel safe in Australia? Because it's been revealed that there's Iranian intelligence operating here. And so one of my suggestions was, the Jewish community, our security costs are always an issue. So, we've got armed guards outside things. So any help from the government on that is always welcome, as well as perhaps restricting what Iranian diplomats, what they can take in these mail packages. It's a bit of a concern. So, yeah.
So we really want the Australian government to come out with a definite policy on Iran. Is that what the aim is?
Yes, Australia's been, unfortunately, the Albanese government has been the weakest link in the West. Canada, the UK, the US, the EU, they've all gone much, much further. Just last week, we announced our first, the first and only sanctions against a few Iranian individuals, which is far short of what any other Western countries are doing.
And do you know what those sanctions were?
So they stop these people visiting Australia, which I don't think any of them were planning to. And they, and if they freeze any assets, they would have here, which again, they've had so much warning. It's unlikely that the people directly involved in putting down the protests have assets here. So it needs to be much wider ranging. We're calling for them to prescribe the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist organization, as President Trump did. So, and others have as well.
And Robert, I think you're also heavily involved in our
Alan's had some trouble with the internet and has just frozen. So he was actually going to be the next person. So we might.
Well, I think he was going to ask me maybe just about a bit on social media, just to comment on.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So just some numbers that might be of interest to people. I've been at AJA just over a year, and I've noticed some phenomenal growth. AJA has we have almost 21,000 Facebook followers, which is by far the largest of any Jewish community organization, and more than double most of them. Some of our posts get in the tens of thousands of reach, hundreds of thousands of reach. So we're doing very well on YouTube. We've got 1,100 subscribers. No other Australian Jewish community organization comes anywhere near that. And if you go to our YouTube channel, you can see these episodes of the speaker series. You can see media appearances. You can see Alan's editorials, interviews. On Instagram, we're just under 1,000 now, which is also one of the largest Jewish organizations, and that's more of the youth groups. That's quite good. Twitter, just under 2,500, and we find that's important for communicating with journalists and politicians in that group. Our newest platform is LinkedIn. It's still very small at the moment, but we've heard from some people that that's the only social media they have. So we have that, and then we've got thousands and thousands of people are subscribing to the AJA emails, the free emails. So if you haven't done that yet, you can subscribe at the website, and that's the best way to keep up to date. Yep.
Okay, all right, thanks, Robert. We're going to go to Michael Bird now. Michael is on the executive of the AJA, and he's got a couple of issues that he particularly wants to talk about in terms of what's been happening this year. Michael, take it away.
Yes, one of the issues that concerns me, and a huge problem Israel advocates like AJA face, have been the plethora of anti-Zionist Jewish organizations, along with the growing number of progressive left and anti-Zionist Jews, many who claim falsely, in my view, to call themselves Zionists. Some of the major anti-Zionist groups doing the most damage to Israel's image in Australia include the progressive New Israel Fund and the left-leaning JCCV affiliates, Australian Jewish Democratic Society. Another big problem we face in Australia is the largest and most effective Palestinian lobby group, APAN, which is Australia Palestine Advocacy Network, who, by the way, are affiliated with the Australian Jewish Democratic Society, thanks to JCCV, who give this Jewish anti-Israel group credibility when they vilify Israeli Jews. Now, APAN and the Australian Jewish Democratic Society, along with the Progressive New Israel Fund, jointly lobby our Canberra politicians for Palestine and against initiatives such as the IRA definition, and also they lobby for Australia to recognise the Palestinian state. Just recently, our Lord Mayor of Melbourne, Sally Capp, heavily funded APAN and the Palestinians. Now, notwithstanding all this, one very woke, very self-promoting Melbourne rabbi celebrated our Lord Mayor, calling her the best ever Lord Mayor of Melbourne, even though she claimed COVID was good for Melbourne and has used our council rates to fund the Jewish hate-mongering APAN Palestinian lobby group. Now, unfortunately, most of our woke Jewish organisations have been too silent condemning the Lord Mayor and this very naive rabbi. However, two of our Melbourne activists, local activists, David Schulberg and Morris Klein, have not been so silent and loudly and publicly calling him out for betraying Jewish dignity, in my view. Good on him. One of the quotes from APAN, we do not support the use of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, IRA, working definition of anti-Semitism as a tool for public policy. Another quote from them, Indigenous Professor Gary Foley, an APAN member, says Australian Indigenous peoples should stand with our Palestinian siblings. I think a Jewish community should take notice when they go to vote for the Voice. Just lastly, can we ever imagine the outcry from our woke JCCV or other leftist Jewish groups if AJA had as one of its affiliates a far left extremist group like Australian Jewish Democratic Society or self-described Jewish Progressive New Israel Fund, who by their anti-Zionist activism, including lobbying against the IRA definition, are pouring fuel on the anti-Semitism fire, in my opinion, a disgrace.
Okay, thanks, Michael. It is a disgrace. Just to wrap up this summary, I'm going to give you a couple of my own thoughts of what happened in 2022. Really, for us here in Melbourne in particular, the federal court case featuring the former students of the Brighton Secondary College and the anti-Semitism that they experienced was very much a talking point, and it still is over the last couple of months. And for people who may not be familiar with what happened, there were five former students, 5 boys of Brighton Secondary College, who sued the school and sued the education department for anti-Semitic acts. And this went on over a period of about 7 years. It wasn't an isolated incident. We're talking about swastikas, we're talking about jokes about Jews, we're talking about referring to Israel as Palestine. This all came from some of their co-students. What was worse is that when these boys complained to the school or management, the principal, nothing much was done about it. So they then decided to sue the school and the education, alleging that nothing much was done about it. The case has been going for a couple of years. What happened was that the boys were in court and they felt very much on their own. And they put out a post, a tweet or a post on Facebook saying, look, we're running this case against the school and the education department, and it's related to anti-Semitism, but we're not getting much support. The problem, of course, was that nobody really knew about it. It was hardly reported in the media. It was hardly reported in the Jewish media, that being the Australian Jewish News. And nobody actually knew what was going on. And the important point, of course, was that these boys were fighting anti-Semitism on their own behalf, but also on behalf of all of us. As a result, the AJA made this a very prominent case. We raised the profile of it, and all of a sudden, people were happy to show their support to the boys by turning up in court. And this happened for the final couple of weeks of the hearing. The hearing's actually finished for now, but it was terrific because people turned up, people supported them, and the boys were very much appreciative of the support that they received. We did open up a campaign under the banner of AJA Tzedakah. We did raise some money that was used to help cover some of the ancillary expenses that the boys had incurred. And so at this point, the hearing's finished. Final submissions are being made in February, and then a decision will come down from the judge in the middle or second half of next year. So there's still a fair bit of time to go. That was really a highlight for me because we got some light shone on this particular issue, whereas most of the communal organisations up until that point really didn't want to show all that much interest. Perhaps a low light from our point of view, and not something that that's new to us or we're surprised about, is the cancel culture that applies in our community, and in particular to the Australian Jewish Association. The cancel culture is alive and well because the AJA is repeatedly they're repeatedly trying to cancel us, fortunately not achieving much success. I actually presented a session at Limud Oz here in Melbourne that outlined some of the background to the cancel culture. It's on our YouTube channel. If you go to our YouTube channel, you'll find the presentation. It was supposed to be done by Michael and I. Michael, unfortunately, had an accident at home the night before the Limud Oz, so he wasn't able to be there. But at that presentation, we go through quite a lot of the background, and it's really quite horrifying. All the major communal organisations are guilty, and I include in that the Australian Jewish News. And to be fair, they do publish our letters, but they totally ignore the Australian Jewish Association the rest of the time. I think that's where I'll leave it for now. I'm just going to hand back to David to do his little promo talk, and then we're going to open it up. So we've got a couple of people there. So now's the time to put your hand up if you want to ask a question or throw an idea out onto the table. So if you're listening to this on J-Air, this is the Australian Jewish Association Zoom event, which we have every Wednesday night. This is our final event for 2022, and tonight is a recap of the year, featuring some of the highlights and some of the lowlights. In a couple of minutes' time, we're going to open it up to an audience discussion. But for now, I'll just hand back to David for a moment to tell us some of the things that he wants to remind people of.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. And as we always do, we want everybody to provide support to AJA. This doesn't happen on its own in a vacuum. If you're not yet a member, go to the website, please, at the end of this event, jewishassociation.org.au, where you can join. Make sure you like and follow the Facebook page. It's usually updated maybe 3 or 4 times a day for latest news and views. I mentioned AJA Tzedakah is open for tax-deductible donations if you want to support the particular objectives of AJA Tzedakah. And obviously we don't have an event to announce for next week, but we do have open for bookings at the moment the AJA Tour of Israel 2023. Now, this is not your regular tour. It's not going to be constrained by political correctness. We'll be going into areas of Judea, Samaria, meeting people at Ariel University, having a session at Hebron with Yishai Fleischer, meeting some remarkable people. There is a tour link on our website at the moment, which gives you access to all the information and the booking facility. So if you are contemplating a trip to Israel, have a look at the AJA tour. It has a lot of content and a lot of special features. And we're limiting it to a maximum of 30 so that, politicians and others can meet and engage with the group properly. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, David. Okay, so just before we go to an audience discussion, as I've mentioned, this is our final Zoom event for the year, and I want to firstly wish all of our Jewish supporters a happy Hanukkah, all of our Christian friends a very Merry Christmas, and everybody a Happy New Year. We've been thrilled with the support for the Zoom events we have received not only this year, but since we started them 3 years ago when COVID turned up into our lives. We have around 100 people or more watching live every week, with more watching on Facebook and many watching the video recording. We also have people from some of our communal organisations watching, anonymously, they say. So we will continue to set the pace so that you guys will have some idea of what much of the Australian Jewish community is really thinking. Our guests have been fantastic, and we will continue to seek out new experts on politics of the Jewish world, as well as invite some of our previous ones back. One final point I will make, we're always looking for people to get actively involved with the AJA, particularly the next generation of younger people. So if you or your children or your grandchildren are politically motivated and have some skills that can assist the AJA, please get in touch with us. I'll put all of our email addresses in the chat function in a moment, as well as the office address for any membership or admin issues. Okay, it's now open to you. Let's see who we've got. I've got Morris, Jeff and Helen. So now's the time to put your hand up. We've got almost a full half an hour. If you have something that you would like to say, you can direct questions to David, Robert, Michael and myself. It will be a bit like Talkback Radio. Please do keep your questions and statements brief. And again, if you want to say something, just raise your hand electronically so I can see. I do try to get people in order, but sometimes it's hard for us as co-hosts of these events with the way Zoom works. So let's start with you, Morris. Please unmute yourself and ask your question or make your statement.
Alan, Jeff was first.
Oh, well, you're okay. We'll go to Jeff in a moment. While you're there,
Jeff, Helen, then me.
Right. Okay. All right, Jeff. If you want to unmute yourself, you can have your say.
Shalom, gentlemen. What does the panel think? I reckon things will improve generally for Israel and for the local Jewish community, to wit on the basis that the Labour honeymoon will end very soon, predicated on the fact that their lunatic climate policies and energy policies will decimate them, and therefore the few decent people amongst them will be able to put pressure on the leadership of the Labour Party to behave more decently to Israel Jews generally.
So what are you saying, Jeff? You're saying that Labor will not survive to cause too much damage?
No, I reckon that Labor's popularity will dramatically wane very soon, and there are good people in the Labour Party, and they will have increasing, it will be an inverse situation whereby they will have more influence and enable, I'm not going to name the Jew haters because it seems fatuous, but the Jew haters will be having much less influence, directly proportional to the lunatic energy policies that they have created. Mm-hmm. Energy prices are deemed to be inevitably increasing by several 100%, and that is untenable. And on the basis
of all right.
popularity.
Okay.
I wish you were right. I wish you were right, Jeff, but I don't have that much confidence in my fellow Australians, especially the ones that voted in this government.
No. Okay. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay, Helen, your turn. Please unmute yourself and ask your question or make your statement.
Yes, I'd like to direct my questions to Dr. Adler, if I could. I'd like to know if he has any idea what is motivating South Australia to be different from the other states when it comes to the matter of the Jewish definition of what it, and what is responsible for the present spurt in anti-Semitism throughout Australia, and thirdly, worldwide. Does he have any ideas?
Thank you, Helen. I think I can shed some light on your first question, which is why is South Australia a particular problem? And if anyone is not familiar with Shahin family, spelt S-H-A-H-I-N, when we finish this session, just Google Shahin family. They're based in Adelaide, a very, very wealthy Arab family that have businesses with a turnover of somewhere between $2 and $3 billion. They control a chain of service stations in South Australia, amongst others, and I believe that they are the largest single funder of APAN, the Australian Palestinian Action Network. So we have a small Jewish community in South Australia, not significant politically. We have a very wealthy, very politically engaged Arab interest, which is has made a lot of statements that are negative to Israel. They make political donations. They're often in Parliament when various things are being discussed. And even when we were when we succeeded in getting the IHRA definition motion through in South Australia, there were protests on the steps of the Parliament House, the whole works, sophisticated letter writer campaign and email campaign to politicians. It was a big deal. Your other question about the rise in anti-Semitism more generally is probably beyond the scope of this evening. Australia's not insulated from the trends worldwide. We have seen an ugly rise in anti-Semitism. Some, if you want to take the harshest interpretation, a couple of people have said to me, well, look, there are now over 600,000 Muslims in Australia, 100,000 Jews. It's very simple. That is the trend that's occurring across the world. I met today, as it happens, with someone who I hope will be a guest early for us in 2023, a Christian Syrian refugee who's got some really interesting insights into what is driving anti-Semitism from the Middle East and the sort of education that people are receiving. That doesn't answer your second two parts adequately because time prevents, but I think if you look at the Shahin family in South Australia, it'll go some way to answering the first part.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. Morris, okay, now you're free to have your say.
Right, firstly, congratulations to Team AJA. You've done a splendid job, an outstanding job for the last couple of years, and I'm proud to be a member. And thank you, Michael, for the acknowledgement a little bit earlier, which has prompted me to enlighten our viewers tonight who have clicked on. There's been a bit of a development with Rabbi Kaltman. He's had a bit of a dummy spit. Let me just give some background. As we all know, as Michael described, APAN, very hostile. Its raison d'etre is the elimination of the State of Israel. The MCC, the Melbourne City Council, provided a grant to APAN for Palestine National Day this year of $11,000. David Schulberg has been on this matter right from the outset, wanting to get some answers from the MCC, interview the mayor or anyone on the council, all to no avail. They've strenuously avoided it.
Morris, just tell everybody who David is.
David Schulberg is the presenter of the excellent Israel Connection program on J-Air, does an outstanding job, and is a proud Jew. And I call him a Maccabee. So we heard that Sally Cap is going to be opening the Pillars of Light Festival, which is organised by Rabbi Kaltman, who happened to be our guest on L'Chaim last week to talk about the Ark Centre and Pillars of Light. Made a couple of amazing comments, but I won't go into that tonight. And so we informed Rabbi Kaltman that we're going to be coming along to Pillars of Light, and we'd like the opportunity to speak with Mayor Cap. He balked at this and was quite concerned, and was voicing his disapproval. David engaged in a few emails with him. Eventually, the event organizer, a chap by the name of Schenker, said, look, we'll try and facilitate something, yada, yada, yada. At the event, and I'll only take another couple of minutes, at the event, David and I were standing at the back of the chairs in front of the stage, and lo and behold, Mayor Cap started walking up towards us, came past us, smiled and said, thank you for coming. David identified himself and indicated that he'd like to ask some questions. And lo and behold, the event organizer, Schenker, stepped in and ushered her away. The following day, we stayed around for the speeches and the choir, which was most enjoyable. The following day, David received an email. I was copied into the email, as were two members of the J-Air management. As I'm copied into the email, I feel I have every right to read this out. David, due to your disrespectful, disgusting and downright disgraceful behaviour last night, I cannot in any way be associated with J-Air. I ask that no one from the station contact me for comment or an interview again. It is sad, now listen to this, it is sad that people like yourself make us all look bad. I responded a couple of hours later. Rabbi Kaltman, for the record, I left J-Air early last year and no longer have any association with the station. As you are well aware, I attended your Pillars of Light last night with David Schulberg, which I have supported since its inception. What exactly was disrespectful, disgraceful, and downright, what exactly was disrespectful, disgusting, and downright disgraceful behaviour about our conduct last night? Lord Mayor said hello to us as she was walking past and thanked us for coming. David then identified himself and asked her if he could ask her some questions. She was well aware because we informed them we're coming, at which point in time, your man Schenker pulled her away. The questions that we wanted to ask the mayor were about anti-Semitism, which both you and the mayor spoke so passionately about in your speeches. The last time I looked, Lord Mayor Sally Cap is a public figure. So I ask again, Rabbi Kaltman, what exactly was so disrespectful, disgusting, and downright disgraceful behaviour about our conduct? No reply thus far. There's been a number of exchanges with apparently J-Air management, and they're a bit concerned, but that is just reprehensible.
Okay, thanks, Morris. We'll keep us posted on what's going on, and we'll put some updates on our Facebook page, so thanks for that. And let's say I'm not overly surprised about the treatment that you received. Okay, let's continue. We've got a few hands up, and we haven't got a lot of time left. So Saul, please unmute yourself and ask your question, and then Anna. Saul?
Thank you very much indeed. First of all, congratulations on everything that you've done. Fantastic association. Don't know where you get the time to do it all.
Okay, thank you.
I wonder next year, if you find the time to do something, concentrate a little bit on the universities. That is a real hotbed of all sorts of things, anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism running very badly in all the universities, and try possibly to get hold of Jewish academics to make statements about the NTEU, its attitude, etc., etc. Now, that's a really serious thing. Less serious, one thing, please, less of the happy Hanukkah. It puts it on the same level as Christmas. Christmas is a serious festival for those who believe in Christianity. Hanukkah is a minor festival. You don't have to stay away from work. You don't have to stay away from school. Equating the two has a slight smell of wokeness about it.
Okay. Well, thanks, Saul. I don't know that I agree with you. I mean, I think people make a big deal out of Hanukkah because it is a very positive festival, and I don't know that we're equating it with Christmas. We're just
people do.
No, well, we're not. We're not talking about Christmaka. We're just saying Happy Hanukkah. But I hear what you say.
Alan, I'd just like to quickly respond to his first point on universities. We're very much aware the universities, not only in Australia, in America, are ground zero for anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism. Unfortunately, one of the biggest Jewish study departments in Australia at Monash University was run by an anti-Zionist Jew. And it is still a very left-wing organisation that, through the wonderful organisation Stand With Us off campus, when they tried to come to Australia to make an entry to help fight anti-Semitism, the Australian Centre for Jewish Civilization, very left-wing, threw them off campus. So first we have to get the Jewish academics on side, then we'll be able to tackle the problem.
And also universities, AJ has been quite involved. David Adler was quoted very prominently when the tertiary union came out, and we also got quite involved in the Adelaide University when this student editor was making anti-Semitic comments. And in all the meetings with politicians, we're always pushing for IHRA to be introduced in educational institutions as one of the main AJA priorities for next year. So.
Okay, all right. Thanks, everybody. Let's go to Anna. Please unmute yourself and have your say.
First of all, just apropos of a lot of the discussion about Adelaide, in the 90s, as far back as that, there was the Adelaide Institute, which was run by an ex-Nazi German. And there were battles from Sydney activists against or trying to close that down, and we managed to. But on another issue, the Labour Party's refusal to acknowledge West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel is also an insult to Christians, because Jesus prayed not in a mosque or in a church, he prayed in the Jewish temple. And for them, that has to be sacred. And it seems to be ignored. And nobody talks about the teaching by Muhammad that you kill everybody who's not a believer. And so that's really where a lot of the fundamental Arab hostility to Israel it comes from.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Thanks, Anna. Does anybody want to respond, or perhaps we'll move on? I think we all know where you're coming from, Anna, and we don't disagree. Joseph, your turn. Please unmute yourself and ask your question or make a statement. Joseph, we can't hear you. You don't look muted, but your microphone doesn't seem to be working.
Perhaps we'll go to the next speaker.
Yeah. Okay, no good. Okay, we've got iPad. So please unmute yourself and ask your question. Yes, it's your turn. Yes.
I'm iPad.
You're listed as iPad.
I'm sorry. I want to firstly thank you all very much on the AJ Executive. I think the work you've done is wonderful. So I am proud to be a member. But one of the things I notice is Robert was talking about the number of followers we have. And I was wondering, so given that we have so many followers, how do we make our presence in the Australian community felt so that the Jewish News and other such can't ignore us the way they do? You were talking about political activism, etc. So instead of our just rocking up every Wednesday night, which is fabulous, what else do we do as members to become more seen and heard?
David, have you got any comments?
Yeah, look, the reality is that you can't measure what AJA does by looking at the Jewish News. They have, unfortunately, a worldview that seems to be very defensive and contrary to some of the values that I think we hold. Someone's just put a comment in the chat, AJN is a lost cause. So we work on other platforms. The social media is important, as are some of our friendly media like Sky News. So I'll give you one example that applies to the period leading up to the Victorian election. I'm sure you all remember that Daniel Andrews decided to smear political opponents by calling them Nazis, didn't provide any names or any evidence. Now, whatever you think of his political opponents, we took the view that appropriating Nazism or the Holocaust for domestic political point scoring was totally inappropriate. I did a segment on Sky News with Rita Panahi, who's turned out to be a very good supporter of the community. And Sky News has its audience from our social media, in addition to however many saw it on Sky News, over 50,000 views of that particular video segment. So we actually got more reach on that item than the Jewish News or any of or all the communal organisations combined. And that's how we make ourselves heard. So the best thing someone can do is to help other people connect with our email list, with our social media, etc., because we have to establish our own forms of communication. We go around the Jewish News. It's not a forum that will carry AJA messages, whether we like it or not. Will it ever reach a point where they can't ignore us? I don't know. I don't know. That's speculative.
Yeah.
But that's our view, that we need to gear up the other platforms as much as possible.
And I'll just add, the Jewish News, it's sad for them, but they're making themselves irrelevant, because when AJA releases a media release, we don't even bother sending it to them anymore, because we know they won't publish it. So we send it to the general media who publish it, whether it's in newspapers or whether interviewing David. So the wider community is hearing about it, and obviously Jews use wider media as well, but the Jewish News seems to have some sort of boycott against AJA, and there's not too much we can do. We're trying, but
No, and I think Rachel raised the question in the chat. What's the problem of mainstream Jewry, the mainstream communal organisations? We don't actually know. We turned up about 5 years ago. We formed because we felt there was a need for a more politically conservative voice within the Jewish community, and we basically said to everybody, "Look, we're here to help you guys. We just want to be part of the broad canvas of ideas that is the Australian Jewish community." They didn't take kindly to us. No, we don't really know why. Maybe it's territorial, but ever since we started, they've been on a mission to de-platform us and cancel us at every opportunity. What does that mean? It means that if we book a venue, they will, the communal organisations will, or some of them will approach the venue and ask them to renege on our booking. If we have guests, people will be approached to suggest that they don't appear on our platform. So this has been going on ever since day one. We work around it. Ultimately, they haven't been overly successful. And I just see Danny Lamb's put his hand up. Danny, do you want to have something to say about that? Please unmute yourself.
It's very disappointing. My successors in both the ECAJ and the ZFA, where I was president of both, have a different political orientation. They're very focused on being PC. PC today is left-leaning, going with the wind of government, and I think your observation about being territorial is absolutely the case. Everybody was comfortable with the space they occupied, and AGA has moved in very successfully. I think it's been a terrific accomplishment, what you guys have pulled off, and being prepared to express yourselves the way you think it ought to be. So in respect to Yerushalayim as the Ir Birah, the capital of Israel, that can be hammered on a regular basis. And it hasn't been hammered on a regular basis by the argument. Yes, they've said something, but there's been very little noise about the recent move from opposing the swath of regular anti-Israel resolutions that come up towards the end of the year that was referred to before, the move to abstention during the last government and even during Julia Gillard's government. Australia voted against those resolutions. But I haven't heard enough from either, at least maybe I'm missing it, that the three organisations, the ZFA, the ECAJ, which are a community elected, and AJAC, which is a private fiefdom, but the three are integrated together today, and you're not going to hear very much from them on any critical government situation. So I think the AJ has got to continue doing what it's doing. I think the AJN and what it will produce and what it won't produce is in the hands of the editor. This current editor obviously doesn't have an interest in anything with AJA. Nothing will change with that at all. You've just got to keep going the way you do. I don't know how you go with J-Wire and what sort of recognition you get from Henry. I'll be interested to hear that.
David?
J-Wire goes a bit hot and cold. We do get pieces in there from time to time, and other times not. It's got probably an email list of somewhere between 2,000, 2,500. So it's significant, but not huge. But yeah, hot and cold.
Okay. All right. And just before we go, Joseph, let's give you another try. Please unmute yourself and let's see if we can hear you.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Very good. Thank you.
I worked it out. Not so nerdy after all. Look, perhaps it's in the best interest of the AJA to stay exactly where it is. Independent, outspoken, and continually increasing its membership base through social media. I don't think there's going to be too much advantage to trying to get the Jewish News or other left-leaning Jewish organisations to lean in our direction, because obviously they're going the other way. So I think if we just stay as we are, I think we can only benefit from that and grow as the AJA has grown over the last few years. So that's all kudos to you. I think you should be focusing more on spreading your message via available channels than it is trying to spread it through channels that are obviously trying to cancel you. And I think the main media is probably a better source of informing the public than the AJA, than the Jewish News, which not many people read. So, but what I just wanted to say is in regard to anti-Semitism, and I think we need to perhaps take a different look at it, and a different look as to its cause, maybe identifying it more as a fungal world fungus that needs to be eradicated rather than a virus. Viruses can be cured, but fungi tend to live in the dark and they pop up their little mushrooms when the going gets good. And the best way to kill fungus is to shine a light on it, and that's the light of truth and the light of love. And you may recall that some years ago I put forward a proposition that perhaps we should form a branch called the Pro-Semite movement, which is a movement which could spread the message, the positive message of Judaism, so that people can see that there is good in us and not just listen to the negative hyperbole that seems to spread out from all these corners. So perhaps we should look at revisiting that concept and acting on it.
Okay, thanks, Joseph. Yes, we do try to make a point of promoting the positive side of things, but certainly take your views on board. Okay, we're going to wrap it up there. Just before we go, Saul, close your ears for 2 seconds, because I'm going to remind everybody to light their Hanukkah candles in a moment. The L'chaim program with Morris Klein is on right now on 3ZZZ FM 92.3 or 3ZZZ.com.au. That's all we have for tonight and for this year. Don't forget that you can keep up to date with what AJA is talking about on our Facebook page. Please like it and share it widely. Thank you to David, Robert, Michael for tonight, and for the other people that help behind the scenes. But for now, we wish you all happy holidays and look forward to seeing you back with us towards the end of January next year. So for the last time in 2022, it is a very good evening to you all. Bye for now.